Okay, so now that we're finished davening, we're going to continue talking about the Shema, which we began talking about, and we're going to davening. So I never really talked about the structure and the flow and sequence of prayers after the Amida. So I assure you, we will get there eventually. But now that we're at the Shema, so I figured we'll take a deeper dive into Shema and then into the Amida, and then we'll continue with the structure of the rest of the prayers, and then we'll go back as we move along and focus on understanding some of the other prayers in a deeper, more meaningful, and hopefully more personal way. So, but we've been talking about the Shema. So yesterday we focused on the word Shema, the first word of the Shema. We cover our eyes. God is invisible. He wants us to know Him, and therefore the term that's used is to hear God. Shema, hear, O Israel. And the reason we say to hear is because, as I said, it's not really to hear, but as the word in Yiddish, which I don't know how it translates into English, is derher, that it should resonate with you. It should become part of you. It's something that should be implemented and inform the way you live your life. This knowledge. And what are we talking about? That Hashem Elokeinu, that the Lord is our God. So what does that mean? Let's keep going through that line. We'll work our way through it, and hopefully by the end of the week we'll move on to the next paragraph. So Hashem Elokeinu. So if you look in the Shema, you'll see, well, in our siddur, the PDF at least that I share, so you'll see the word Hashem, which is translated as Lord, which is a conversation in its own right why it's translated in our siddur as Lord, is Yud Yud. But really, that's the four-lettered name of God, the Yud, K, Vav, K. We've talked about that name in the past, the transcendent, ineffable name of God, called the Tetragrammaton. It's like tefillin are called phylacteries, so now you know. Now, this name of God, the Yud Kei Vav Kei, the four-letter name of God, that's translated as Lord, and Elokeinu, which is translated as God. Elokeinu, technically, really, Elokeinu means more Lord, but that's, like I said, we'll save that for another time, why it's translated the way it is. But the point is that it's Hashem Elokeinu. Those are two names of God, God or God, our God. What does that mean? So, the name Elokim, which is Elokeinu, is how we say that Elokim is Elokeinu, is our God. The name Elokim, that name of God represents God that is concealed within nature. If you open up the book of Genesis, open up the beginning of the Torah where it talks about creation, it says Bereshit bara Elokim, right? That's the name of God that it uses to describe God as creator. Elokim, the name Elokim, the root of the word comes from the word Ele, which means mighty, strong. So God is known as mighty through his works, through his creation. That's how we know his strength. If it was just God, we wouldn't know of his strength. But in addition, Elokim, which means the strength, really represents the strength or the life force within creation, because all of existence exists because God wills it into creation, into existence. And so therefore, everything's strength or everything's existence comes from God's will, as it were, animating it, creating it, and giving it life. So Elokim represents God as he is invested in creation, right? It's God as he's mighty, and meaning that, and as he's the life force, the koach, the strength, the life force within creation. But of course, nature, we know, conceals God. The word for nature in Hebrew is teva. The word teva, which means nature in Hebrew. It also makes good slippers, medicine. The word teva, which means nature, comes from the same word that we use actually in the davening. We said in Az Yashir, Tub'u bayam, sunk in the sea. So teva is nature, but it also means like sunk. What happens when a ship sinks? First you see it floating on top of the water, then it sinks, it's gone, you don't see it anymore. So it represents God's energy that's sunken, as it were, in, meaning concealed by nature. And that's also why the word Elokim, the gematria, the numerical value of the word Elokim, is the same as the word Hateva, the nature. Because God, Elokim, is God's might as it is invested in nature, but at the same time, being invested in nature, it's concealed by nature, right? So that's Elokim. Creation, I'm using the word nature very loosely, means really all of existence, all of creation, is defined by time and space. All of existence is defined by time and space. Time and space are both limitations. If you take up certain space, it means you have finite borders, and you occupy that finite space. Time is also finite. There's this moment, there's past, there's present, and there's future. There are different moments. right? So you're limited to this moment right now. You're limited to this space. So all of creation it's by definition is time and space, and time and space is a limitation. Okay, so that's Elokim. Elokim is God as he is limited or limits himself, confines himself within the confines, the limitation, the definition of nature. What is Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, that name of God, the one that we don't see in creation, it only appears later in the story of creation when it starts to talk about man, is Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, that name of God, which we don't pronounce, and as I've mentioned, I say Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, we use a K, not even a Hey, because we don't even spell out the words, the letters of that form the name, let alone pronounce the name. But that name, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, if you reread those letters, you can read it as Haya, Hoveh, Yiyeh. Those letters form those three words, Haya, Hoveh, V'Yiyeh, which means past, present, and future, which represents God as he transcends nature, as he's not defined or confined to time and space. So very simply, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, that name of God, is God as he transcends nature, as he is beyond nature, removed from nature, or as the source of creation. And Elokim is God as he operates within creation, within the confines and limitation of creation. So when we say Shema Yisrael, we're saying, Hear, O Israel, and we're addressing the Jewish people. This is a Jewish idea that then we need to eventually share with the world. But this is a uniquely Jewish conception of God, is that Havaya is Elokeinu. There's no two separate things. There's not like this immovable, ineffable thing called nature and existence, and that God is stronger than existence. God could bend nature. God can overpower nature, can override it. But it's this immovable sort of force. There's no such thing. Havaya Elokeinu, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, Hashem, the Lord, in the translation, the Lord is our God, our koach, our strength. So we said Elokim is koach, it's the strength, it's the life force that animates all of creation. So what's our life force? Elokeinu, our life force. What animates us? We're saying, what is Elokeinu? What is our life force? Is Havaya, is God as he's transcendent. And here you have the paradox of being a finite being, a human being walking the face of the earth with our bodies, with our limitations, and yet we're saying that our life force is not the limited variety of creation, Elokim, but it's Havaya. It's God as he transcends. In practical terms, I don't know how practical, but let's put it in other terms, what that means is that we're never victims of circumstance, and we're never subject to the evils or the whims of nature. There's no such thing. A Jew knows that we're always dialed into something beyond nature. So whenever things look bleak, whenever things seem unimaginable, obviously God operates through nature. This is a broader conversation. It's not for now about how we can reconcile this in our lives. But the statement we make in Shema is that we are not bound by the dictates and laws of nature. Our very existence defies nature. Our very existence is a miracle, as we've talked about in the past as well. And so we recognize that our existence and our life force, our energy comes from God as he's beyond nature. What's the difference? Where it comes from? So one thing is we know we're never limited. One thing we know is that things are never hopeless. God is always in charge and always calls the shots, and our reality can change at any moment. That's one difference. But the other difference, the other impact of this is the next part of the Shema, the last words of that statement, which we'll talk about, God willing, tomorrow. I'd like to just conclude with today's Chitas, today's Chumash and Tanya. So today's Chumash talks about, again, we're in Parshat Tazria Metzora, combined double portion Tazria Metzora. And in it today, we're talking about